Good afternoon or good morning, ladies and gents. Adam Flynn here, sub-franchisor for the Big and Scott Network. Here today for this week's edition of On the Couch. And I'm going to talk to you today about the importance of choosing the right agent and the importance of making sure that the agent that you do engage is able to explain to you a strategy and be able to communicate that strategy to you to give you a sense of confidence that you're choosing the right agent who's going to get you the highest possible price. So when selling a property, primarily there's 4 different selling methods that you can adopt. One is a fixed price method, which is a very old way of selling real estate. Going back about 20 years ago, that's all people would really use. And back 20 years ago, if a property was worth, let's say, $200,000, the way the fixed price method works is you'd have an asking price, for example, $209,950. And the thought process behind that is that if a buyer then offered you $200,000, they think they're getting a bargain, you're getting the price that you really wanted, and everybody is happy. I'm not a huge fan of that. Look, some agencies still do recommend that method. I'm not a huge fan of that particular method because you're putting a ceiling on where the property can go from a price point of view. Because if you had a buyer, for example, who wanted to spend $300,000, the chances are they're still going to work you down in price as opposed to looking at the price or the fixed price and offering over and in excess of that. So it's a very old way of selling real estate. Number 2 is what's called a range method, where buyers tend to always gravitate towards the bottom end of the range. Number 3 is what's called a closing date sale, which is essentially a 4-week tender process whereby you have a nominated date and time whereby all offers are to be submitted. It doesn't mean you can't sell prior to that date and that time, but the offer would need to be significant enough to motivate you to sell prior to that point in time. So essentially what you do is you use that date as a negotiating tool to say to the buyer, look, we're happy to sell as long as the offer that you put forward is in excess of the vendor's expectation. And then fourthly, of course, is an auction. And very, very similar to the closing date sale process, the auction is a very structured 4-week window whereby you have a nominated date and time as to where the auction is going to be conducted. Once again, doesn't mean you can't sell prior to the auction date, but the offer would need to be significant and high enough to motivate you to sell prior to the auction date itself. So with regards to when choosing an agent, it's really important that the agent is able to explain the methods to you. Also, based on the property that you've got, explain what we would be recommending is the best course of action for you to use. Because when you do sell a property, you've really got one opportunity to make sure that you're choosing the right agent and it's exposed to the market in the correct fashion. And a big complaint that we do get is when I ask people, have you sold before? Well, not me, I'm not listing anymore, but when I did list, I would ask people, have you sold before? How was the experience? And the biggest complaint that people tend to have is that when they had sold previously, they weren't 100% convinced that they, once all the dust had settled, that they got the highest possible price for their property. And that's a big concern. So essentially they weren't happy with the previous selling experience. So when people do launch a property to the market, it's so important that the agent that they engage has a very, very sound strategy, because essentially and potentially people really have one opportunity to make sure they're getting the highest possible price for such a valuable asset. So I hope that was informative for you today. I hope you're all well, and we'll see you for next week's edition of On the Couch. Thank you. Cheers.